Hey, Jason.
Dom, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. Nice to talk to you again.
Nice to talk to you as well.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've been on the line. We had a nice pre-call where we planned ourselves out. Let's see how we do on sticking to that.
Well, let's see how it goes.
So, Jason, you're from distribution team, and you're kind of a different guy for me to have on this podcast, which is exactly why I brought you here, right? Because the business owners we talk to, well, they feel what you build all the time, and now they're wondering, who's this Jason guy?
Absolutely. Yeah, just a wee bit different here. Let's just say I'm a little further up the chain than maybe some of the people that you usually on this.
Yeah.
So.
Do you want to tell us who you are and what you do and how you come to be on a podcast for our trade?
Sure. Well, I do. I specialize in wholesale distribution, and that's really where I came. I was recommended by one of the listeners here, and a client I had years and years ago, and really near the inception of their business. And so I had an opportunity to see them at a very small start out rate, and then as they grew. And they are a company that supplies sheet goods, abrasives, and full cabinet systems now. They've grown in leaps and bounds. It's kind of been fun to watch them grow up. But I tend to specialize in working with those wholesale distribution companies and the folks who supply all those wonderful things that most of your readers or your listeners turn into hard goods and make people's homes prettier and things like that. So
yeah. Well, that's exactly why you're here, because we don't normally, as owners, we don't get to talk to the guy who trains the distributors.
Right.
So pretty cool perspective.
Well, that's really where I started out, actually, is I was a distributor. And so I come from one of these unique perspectives. I'm not some MBA guy. I'm not some academic guy that came in and spouts theory. I actually spent a lot of my career, probably 15 years of my career on the distribution side and owning a distribution company, and then decided for some silly reason to go out and start speaking and teaching and doing all this. So I've been doing this now for the last 15 years. So it's been a journey for sure.
Yeah, well, high expectations on you as a speaker then here on a podcast.
Uh-oh, now I'm in trouble.
Now you're in trouble. No,
yeah,
that's all good.
Sure.
No, I think we appreciate it here because really digging into the layers of a business, because we're business owners who just happen to be cabinet makers, architecture millworkers, dealers of cabinet systems. But for business owners, too often we get stuck in our own business and we don't start thinking about the other inputs, right? We stop at the wood or we stop at maybe the back bay door, but learning more from people like you is really valuable, because then we can figure out how to run our business better, how to have more intelligent conversations when your vendors show up at our door. I think that's my goal here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's really ultimate goal. I mean, and again, on your point, for me, it was hugely expanding when I started to recognize the outside world beyond my family business. I mean, it was really fascinating, and I started to learn. And then now, as I've been teaching, I've had this exposure to so many different facets of not only distribution but manufacturing, and really going down to end user side. And it's fascinating to me, absolutely fascinating. But I think there's some basic underlying principles that roll through this whole thing. And again, what was a mystery before starts to actually make sense now after, now 30 years, but slow learner, I guess.
Let's see if you can get us there faster than 29 years.
I'm hoping. I'll do my best.
So this episode, you and I coined it before we got on the call today.
Yeah.
Credit limits to credit lines.
Yeah.
And do you know why I suggested that as a topic?
Tell me why. Give me your answer. I've got some ideas, but please.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, and then you tell me why you thought I did. But it came from frustration. The frustration of the people who listen, the clients I work with, feedback I get is, look, we've got this job. And we need to buy, let's say, $5,000 worth of drawer glides, but our credit limit is $1,000, and the job's going to take this much time. Our vendor won't extend us the credit to finish the job without paying them in advance. We didn't get enough deposit to do that, and it's this really stressful, insanely stressful, vicious circle. They're dipping into their own personal lines of credit. They're pulling money off their credit card to pay the distributor. What it actually does on our side is it breaks the trust level between the manufacturers and the distributors, and it becomes kind of a
Sure.
fight. So that's why I said something along this lines, and then we came up with the title, how do we move from credit limits to credit lines?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, again, I think I can share that frustration because I grew up in the construction supply business. And so I grew up in this world, and I've seen this, and I've seen projects come to a halt for some silly arbitrary credit limit number that nobody really can articulate why it was that number.
Yeah.
I said, well, it's like that. Yeah, we have about that much, right? It's that exactly. And I can really, when I talk to credit managers, a lot of them can't really answer that question to a level that I'd be comfortable with. And so I think that there really needs to be a complete overhaul of that process and that thought process. And, I think that's really, if we start looking at the line, and the reason I always like to say lines versus limits is, well, I mean, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. A credit limit is limiting. It's limiting the flow of commerce. It's limiting the ability for that person to build something. And if they don't get to build anything, nobody wins in this situation.
Yeah.
And so we have to open that up. And that's the whole reason we have credit to begin with, was to get people to buy more stuff. That was the whole intent of this.
Yeah.
This is the thing. And a lot of what I'm saying here, I took from a very good friend of mine, a gentleman who I followed for years before I even got into this. Gentleman named Abe Walking Bear Sanchez. And with that kind of a name, you can imagine this character, this huge, bigger than life caricature. And that's really what he was, Walking Bear. I mean, he was great. More of a philosopher than a businessman, and he will be the first to admit that. But he was probably one of the pioneers in this movement to move away from that accounting-based limitation to this open-based lines of credit. And really, the extension of credit was always supposed to be sales enhancement.
Right.
And that's why he drove that whole point for years and years and years. The 2x4 to the back of the head, that type of thing, that's him. But, and he retired a few years ago. And I just have loved that philosophy over the years. I've really enjoyed it because I think the management of credit, B2B trade credit, has been so much of a mystery to our company, especially small business owners.
Yeah.
We're told we have to do it just because everybody else does it. You should always just extend credit to somebody. But why? What was the intended purpose? And I think, and that's one of the things I loved about Walking Bear. He always drove us to think about the purpose, not just because. It's why are we doing this? And ultimately, in this case, it's really, we want people to buy more stuff. It was supposed to grow sales. It was supposed to extend this,
not limit things.
Right, not constrict. And I think that the verbiage of credit limits is a constrictor. I think it leads us down a bad path.
So let's assume, let my industry take responsibility for a second.
Okay.
And say, we haven't done a great job of explaining to your industry why we need more of a line of credit or more flexibility or whatever, just more of. So can you give us a couple of high points? What does a vendor, what does a distributor need to know about my shop to extend me more credit? Can we go down that path for a bit?
Sure. I mean, again, I think there's some obvious ones. I mean, your credit worthiness in the past. Have you paid other people?
Yeah.
Let's face it, that's kind of a nice starting point. But I think there's ways, even if, you may not have the most stellar credit rating from the past, there are other indicators, I think that, or things that a distributor can do to help you become more credit worthy. The more, I think it's really incumbent upon that credit manager to want to get you as much credit as possible.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on that because sometimes
they're supposed to want to do this, and I think again, they've been trained the opposite way. But back to the point, some of these folks aren't getting creative enough where they could say, can we collateralize something that you have?
What does collateralize mean? Tell
me. For example, your truck, your pickup truck, or your van, or maybe pieces of equipment or something like that.
Yeah.
something that you own, to help us mitigate that risk a little bit. But I got to find you there. I can get you there. Another thing, if you're willing to work with me, maybe on pricing, for example, I can use my lines of credit with my bank, my financial institutions, to help finance your purchases, even if you can't do that. I can extend you 60 days, for example, or 90 days.
That would help in some cases.
Absolutely. And I think here's the sad part, Dom, is that so many of these, the credit managers and the distributor credit managers, they want to restrict in that 30-day time window. And they don't, and that's not the way construction works. And so those who can't see beyond that,
yeah,
they just make it so hard on the end users, like the customers, like yourselves.
Yeah,
they make it too hard on you. I mean, honestly, you need to pay us when you get paid. That's let's face it, you can't like invent cash out of thin air. So as a distributor, I have to figure out how am I going to be comfortable with you paying me in 90 days.
Right.
And there's a lot of ways I can get there. I just have to get past that mental barrier.
And I suppose one of them might be if you charge me a higher price. My listeners are not happy with me right now, but just
no.
But you have to make money as a distributor. I have to make money as a manufacturer. So that interest rate could be converted into a higher unit cost per piece.
That's exactly where it is, Dom. I mean, and I'm going to open the kimono just a little bit on this thing. And
for those of you watching the video, he's not actually opening.
I'm not actually doing this. Yes. Every 30 extra days is about 0.5% in interest. Is what I, as a distributor, am probably going to have to pay.
Every 30 extra days.
Yeah.
Equals 0.5% in interest.
Right. Assuming that you've got about a 6% APR, annual percentage rate, so you break that into 12 and you figure, okay, about every 30 days is worth about 0.5%. So if you as the customer will allow me 1% more in gross margin, I can finance you.
Wow. Jason.
1%. I mean, and I'm not, so here's the problem. See, Dom, sometimes people will say, if I am the end user like yourself, and the distributor comes to me and says, hey, I need to raise your prices in order to finance you.
Yeah.
They're thinking in terms of like a 10% increase or this massive increase, where I'm saying, hey, if you let me get 1 or 2%, we're golden. We're good.
Yeah.
It's a small, but again, here's the problem is that the credit managers don't explain it that way.
No.
They let you think in these wild, crazy terms, like you're going to be, giving your, your right hand in order to get this line of credit.
Yeah.
And it's not the case. And this is what I think, again, developing better communication skills on the side of the distributor, learning how to talk about credit in a way that people can understand. Because if I told one of your listeners, hey, I can give you 90-day terms if you can let me get, give me 1.5%, higher pricing, if you can do that,
right,
I think we can make this work.
So let's just do the math here. Let's say the drawer slide is $10. Just pick it. It's not
$10,
but it's $10. You're talking about instead of paying in 30 days $10, you're now going to charge me
what, $11.50? Is it? I don't know. I got to do a little math here.
But basically, that's we're talking about $1 difference in change.
That's all it is, Dom. I mean, it's not insurmountable. It's less than coffee money. I mean, come on.
Well, I mean, so the frustration, we don't hear it right now. But there's people driving their truck. There's people walking their dog, picking up poop in that little blue bag, and they're spraying themselves because they're, come on, man, you don't understand. But from our side, we're driven to reduce costs. And so $10 versus $11.50, especially if I have a purchaser or an estimator looking at it, he or she is incented to get me the lowest cost. But the owner has to see the world through a bigger picture. And that's why people listen to this podcast anyways.
Right, sure.
They want that bigger perspective that you're bringing us today. So thank you. But I like this angle. I've got to try and understand your world to get my world to work.
Right. And I think also, one of the other things, Dom, and this is kind of one of those strange things that we have especially in the construction related distribution markets. The percentage that the actual product, the cost of the slide or the wood or anything like that to a whole project is infinitesimal. I mean, it's such a small percentage. And so to beat up that distributor, it's like get that lowest cost. Well, fine, you can drive to the lowest cost, but if they won't get you the product on time when you need it, you're going to have somebody standing there twiddling their thumbs at a very high labor rate. And so I think what we have to understand is that the labor is the most expensive piece here. And so 1 or 2% more, but I'm going to get it to you right now from a labor savings standpoint, you're just killing it. You're crushing it.
Yeah.
So this is, again, putting on my old construction supply, hat. I know that world. I mean, I know that world so well.
It sounds great. I mean, but the other things that we hear are errors, mistakes on the vendor side. That adhesive is supposed to cost $45 a unit. You charge us $48. I got to go chase it now. It's a big headache. Why aren't you giving me the pricing you agreed to? We get caught up in those things. Let me ask you if this would be an approach to get around. Not around. We've got a credit situation which we can look at as a challenge or an opportunity.
Right.
Okay. Would it be beneficial for me as the manufacturer to say, Jason, can you come in on February 1st, you and your sales rep, can we talk about the pricing for the year? I want to tell you what my annual projection for purchasing with you is going to be. Because I think we're about to move from 600 grand to 800 grand. Is it good to call in the vendor and say, let's talk about this year's sales?
You could, you can talk about it. I mean, but as that supplier, I'm going to listen to that and I'm going to say, okay, I think we can work on that. But I think sometimes when we say that we're going to, I'm going to grow by $200,000 with you this year. What's that based on? Are you sure about that? And so sometimes I don't want to go bet on the come. I don't want to go and buy all this stuff that could be very specific for you. Like you have that particular edge tape, for example, that edge that is, in chartreuse, and I'm not ever going to sell that again. So I think there has to be some skin in the game, both sides. I mean, I think that sometimes that kind of information is actually very nice because we actually can, as a distributor, do some better predicting on the inventory that we need to bring in.
Yeah, that's where I was going with that.
I mean, it can. A good distributor, I'll be honest with you, though, has factored that in and predicted that that they predict a little bit more than what is actually going to happen, and that's why we actually have inventory at the end of the year sitting on the shelves because they predict higher. I mean, it's just that's what you do. You cover yourself on certain items.
Yeah, as you would have to because it takes delivery time. You can't get that chartreuse edge band tape tomorrow.
That's right.
From Germany or Brazil, and that's a 3-month process on its own, right?
Of course. I
think let me tell you where that question or that strategy came from our side. And I come from the business coaching of wood trades manufacturing. So I'm not a wood trades manufacturer. I'm a business coach who serves that industry. But when we do a good job of our own predictive modeling, it's something that we call the wave. Some companies have a 3-month wave of work. They know that their work is out 3 months. Other companies have a 1-year wave or a 2-year wave.
Sure.
But I want you to see that. I want you to look at that and go, hey, Rubino's crushing it. Like, I think we can extend credit to this guy. We can work with him. We can get that drawer glide business because I looked at his board and he's already got 3 months of work, 6 months of work. We know it's coming. So maybe we're willing to work with this company.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely, honestly, the more communication you have between the two organizations, you're going to have comfort level on both sides.
Yeah.
And really, if I've got this finite amount of money that I can throw into extending credit out there, I am going to choose those that I am more comfortable with. So yes, that type of communication, it's always like, okay, taking a step back here, a little example back, when when I coach distributors, one of the things that I do is I have them talk to their bank or their line of, their credit loan officer. I want them to talk to them at least once a month. Be the person who is sharing all this information, what's going on in your company.
Yeah.
I don't want to see any surprises. And I see this all the time is where, they have this annual meeting with their line of credit, or their loan officer, and something drastic has changed in the company and they've failed to mention it to their lending partner.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't, so there's a lot of misunderstanding. And what I found over the years, again, especially in my family business, just personally, is when we would keep them in the loop, we would tell them monthly, hey, here's where we are, here's where we're going, here's the different things. The wallet was open all of a sudden, and they would find creative ways to get us more money, extend the line, right, even if we were a little not quite cool on the covenants, those types of things. So
yeah. And that's, I think we're coming at this from the same place. I'm suggesting to the people that I work with and the listeners here, be open with your distributors, with your suppliers, and tell them, if you have the conversation once a year, you're probably only having it with the sales rep. Well, the sales rep's not the decision maker. The sales manager's not even the decision maker. But I'll tell you what, the credit manager never comes on site. Maybe if you're a massive purchaser. But the credit manager's behavioral, let me ask you this, Jason. What is the typical personality of a credit manager? Just so all the listeners are answering this themselves.
And I've met the contrary, of course, and those of you who I've met and I love, please don't take this the wrong way.
I put you on the spot there.
Not the most hugging crew, I'll put it that way. They're not the huggers of the room. And, they tend to be very analytical, introspective, not as willing to take risks. They want the math to always add up perfectly. Yeah. And the gray area is not a comfortable place for them to live. And so what we have to try to do, and I think, this is one of the bigger challenges that if we want our credit to be this tool, if we want it to actually drive revenue for us and make a better relationship with the customer base, then the people who are managing that credit not necessarily have to change who they are, but perhaps they should learn some of the tools of sales. Maybe they should learn some of those relationship management tools that we teach salespeople, or salespeople sometimes innately have that.
Perfect. It all comes down to relationships, the whole thing, on both sides. And
absolutely agree.
We have to do a better job of opening up that relationship and letting your team know. You know what I think the perfect outcome of this particular podcast would be? As if all my listeners told all their vendors to go listen to your podcast or check out your website or talk to you somehow.
That would be fantastic. I can always use it, always use a good conversation. And frankly, I can use some good stories. Those are always fun too.
Yeah. There's
some war stories. Those are always fun.
Yeah, war stories are fun. Have you been part of those good news stories where you worked with a distributor that was really able to do some unique things, and then they just stood out from the market so much better?
Well, yeah. Let me. I'll talk about one. I can talk about a couple different examples, but one in particular, it was kind of interesting. This particular organization, they really viewed that credit extension as that traditional model, very traditional button down. I'm going to protect myself, because they went through the recessionary period of 08, 09,
right.
And where there was bloodletting all over the place, and there was a lot of folks that went bad on them, and to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and so those scars run deep. And so they were very protected in their way. So through some coaching, so the credit manager, she thought she was a people person, and she thought she, was, and we started to talk about how to become more of a people person. I mean, I don't ever want to claim, that I know one way or the other, but I could see the behavior. It was very protectionist. It was very know first, ask questions later. And that's not the way we want. I mean, At a time, yes. A decade ago, yeah, that was probably what we needed to do. But today, we need to really run with the wave for a while. We need to run this and go. And so in this particular example, started talking about visiting some of these, going out and riding with salespeople, leaving the office and riding with salespeople. And what she wound up doing is she would go and she would sit with these people and she would actually go face to face. She'd known the people who were paying the bills, by name forever.
Right.
But never had, and we're talking about maybe half a mile away, maybe a mile away. I had never really gone and taken the time to actually go face to face with them.
Yeah.
And by doing that, that started to alleviate, it started to melt her just a little bit, and she started to recognize, how can I help these folks out? And so I think ultimately one of the best things the distributor did was have the credit manager ride with the salespeople to actually meet the customer face to face and see that they were actually a human being and things were going on.
Yeah.
To that point, one of the things I love to see happen is credit managers start to adopt a more sales type approach to their job. And because let's face it, on the other side of the relationship, that payables person, whoever cuts that check, that is a real person. That is a person with nuances, quirks, things about them, and their methodology is different. Yeah. I think that's where we get ourselves in so much trouble, is we assume, well, they always cut checks on the 25th of the month, or they always do this, instead of asking the question, hey, when do you all cut checks? Well, some of them cut checks on the 10th, 20th, and 30th of the month. Yeah. Some of them cut checks twice a month. Some of them only cut checks when you yell at them enough. I mean, what is the purpose? Or, I mean, what's the method? And I think when a credit manager understands the method behind that other person, and they start to develop more of a sales relationship mentality, that's when barriers break down and they can grow. So this particular organization, it worked famously, absolutely famously, and now they're allowing customers to go a little bit bigger, and revenue in that company has grown probably 15%. Since we've been doing that. I mean, it's been a number of years. Don't get me wrong; it wasn't an overnight.
It changes things, right? I think
that?
It changes things.
It sure does. Yeah, absolutely.
Humanizing the transaction changes things. We would be guilty of it from our side as well, because we're so consumed with the product. And this is what we're trying to talk to business owners about here, is we're consumed with the product, making sure the installers are putting it in perfectly and it looks nice. That's great. But we've got these inputs to think about. And people have heard me on this podcast say this a lot, is that as business owners, we get paid from the neck up. Mm-hmm. We get paid to think, and we actually get paid to be creative. And so thinking about the critical constraints in our business, and different than our competition, is what leads to really big results. Because could you imagine, let's say you're in a town and there's 4 distributors that you deal with on a regular basis, and you are the most communicative with all of the distributors. You're the one they all know, whether they like you or not, they know you. And then the market tanks. There's going to be 4 different meetings in 4 different offices saying, we got to pull back. We got to pull back. Who's our top priority customers? Which wood shop are we selling to? I want to be on the list. They go, we got to keep selling to Dom. That guy.
We got to keep him going. Got to keep him going.
The other guys, we don't hear from them. Cut them back.
Dom, I think you make a great point. One of the things that I coach people, one of my good friends was in the metalworking business, and he had suppliers in, the steel supplier. He had industrial supply people and whatnot. And I told him, I said, hey, Charlie, go see these people. Get in front of the credit manager. Go introduce yourself. Yeah. And talk to them constantly. And if you're going to be a little late on something, and you're going to have a little problem with something, or you're not getting paid, call them up now. Just call them and tell them what's going on. Yeah. I tell you, nobody gets cut off if they're communicative. If they communicate, you don't get cut off. You don't get penalized. Yeah, a credit manager will be so lenient with you if you call them every week and tell them what's going on. But if you don't talk, and I think the expression is broken promises. You break a promise. You say you're going to have a check there on this date, and it doesn't show up. That's going to be a big strike against you. if you are ducking phone calls, which can happen, that's a big strike against you. And frankly, just tell people what's going on, and I'm going to pretty much guarantee you're not getting cut off.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is.
The more you can communicate, it's true with anything. You can't run away from problems in the world. And it can be difficult and humbling to call and say, look, I'm having a little bit of trouble this month.
Yeah.
Here's why. The job is still progressing. Things are okay. There's a number of change orders that came in.
Right.
Our expectation is this. The credit manager's life is driven by a view of risk and risk mitigation.
Right.
I'm sorry. I'm telling you what the credit. That's my.
Well, no, I mean that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. And unfortunately, that is dominant in their world. But yeah.
So I've got to play to that. I have to talk to that and help them wherever I can.
Absolutely.
Help them do their job, right?
Right. And again, if they know who you are and they know that you're someone who talks, and you get money to them when you commit, you actually do what you say you're going to do. Nobody cuts you off. Yeah. Everybody is there in your corner trying to make sure that you can still get product, and you're still staying afloat. Everybody goes through tough times. Everybody does a bad job. Everybody gets stuck on a bad gig. It happens.
I can see. Let me phrase this differently. The different conversations I've had over my life with business owners who want to move to what's called the next level. The general feeling I get is it's really hard to keep all these things organized. Yet it doesn't have to be. And so that's why we talk about systems or processes to put in place.
Totally, absolutely.
That I think I'm going to put it in the show notes for this episode is the finance and forecast meeting agenda. And I know that sounds really compelling and super exciting.
Yeah.
My free gift to the world, but it is actually a free download on the website. But it's the finance and forecast meeting agenda, but it also has scripts with it so that the owner can read it and facilitate that meeting. But what happens in that meeting is then you get the info back from your people, which you can then take to your team, your guys, the distribution people, and say, here's the situation in my company right now. Let's talk about those drawer lines. Because if you don't have the info, I can't have the call. You can't have the credit if I don't do the communication.
I'm just trying to get my head around what percentage of customers actually come to the distributor and say, hey, here's what's going on in my world. I mean, it's got to be infinitesimal. I mean, I'm going to say what, maybe 3% at best. Yeah. It's very rare. Yeah, very, very rare that the customer would initiate the meeting versus the distributor or the supplier would.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's why I talk to my clients about doing that. About saying let's have an annual meeting, but bring in your sales manager, bring in your credit manager. At least the invitation is there. They can say no, but I'll keep working on that. But the more I'm known inside that company, I'm going to have fans, allies inside that company, because they're going to have their meetings. When you know what is hitting the fan, I want my sales rep and that sales manager to say, hang on, Rubino's shop, that needs to move up the top of the list, folks. Let me tell you why. Proactive in their business. I've been in there. It's a clean shop. They've got great staff. They build great products. They talk to us all the time. Then the credit manager, even if they've never been here, they should have some reasons to say, okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. This has been great, and I've taken a lot of your time, but I think it's been really valuable for our listeners. So thank you, Jason.
You bet. My pleasure as always.
So I had said earlier in the call, and I think we should all do this. Everybody listening should go to their vendors and say, you got to talk to this guy, Jason. So if people want to do that, how do we find you so that we can all refer you a ton of business?
Oh, fantastic. I always love to hear that. That's one of my favorite things. My website is thedistributionteam.com, and or you can email me at jason@distributionteam.com. I'd give you my phone number, but I'm probably not going to answer anyway because I'm a traveler. So email me. That's the best way to catch me. I'm pretty darn good at hotel room email chats and things like that. So really, Don, one of the big reasons I got in this business was to help companies and help them feel comfortable in what they're doing. And really, I want to see the entrepreneurs thrive. That's always what I wanted to do. I don't work with big companies. I work with small companies because I want them to make it. That's a vibrant part of the economy. And so So I value when people have a question, I'm not going to charge you. I'm just give me a question. If I've got an opinion, I got one, I can help you out. So
yeah, I think it's the best way to be anyways. Open up, help people, and it'll all come back anyways.
Absolutely agree with that.
Jason, thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast. I'm sure my listeners have gotten a lot out of this because we don't normally get to talk to you.
Anytime you'd like to, please. I'd love to do it.
Yeah, fantastic. So we'll have your podcast up, and in there we'll mention your website again. So those of you listening, you can either go to the show notes or the website to see that on the blog, where there'll be links to Jason's website. And I'll also make sure from our side that we've got the finance and forecast meeting agenda and scripts, so that you can use that to get the data, the information that Jason's tribe, his community needs. All right. Well,
great.
You may not know this because this will go live in a couple of weeks, but I can say Merry Christmas to you because we're recording this.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
It may not go live till January or February, but we'll say that anyways. Thank you, Jason, for sharing.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom.
Bye.
Bye.